So I had an epiphany, and it came a couple of years ago at the beginning of the school year. I hadn't been home for a couple of days because, as you know, as superintendent, I spend more time in my district than I do in my house. And finally had a chance to catch my breath, sat down with my daughters, and talked to them about their new school year. Wanted to know how it was going, how they were doing. So I asked them the same kinds of questions that probably everybody asks their kids. How are your classes? Which ones do you like? Which ones don't you like? What's going to be hard? What's going to be easy? Those kinds of questions that we ask all of our students and our kids to try to get them to reflect a little bit about the school year. And I listened to what my kids had to say. I have two daughters, currently both in high school. And what they told me were things like, English is great. She really likes me. Or math is awful. That teacher is crazy and she doesn't like anybody. Or science is, the teacher's kind of weird, but she's kind of funny and I think she likes me, so I think it's going to be fine. Every one of their answers about all of their classes, when I asked them, they had nothing to do with the actual content. They had everything to do with their perception of the teacher teaching them. And even more than that, it was really focused on how they thought the teacher felt about them. Now, they've probably been telling me those kinds of answers for years, because I ask those same questions every year. But this year it was a little different. I resisted the urge to redirect, because at first I thought, well, let me get them to think deeper. They're obviously not thinking deeply enough about the class, about the experience, about what's going on. So typically I would ask questions like, well, what did you do in there today? What's your homework like? What question did you have when you left the room? Again, those kinds of teacher questions. But instead I thought, let me ask father questions. Why don't you think she likes you? Why do you think she likes you? What are you doing in there? What's fun? What's interesting? And what ensued was a big conversation about their experience in the room, what's happening, the teachers, the other students, and it was wonderful. And at the end of the conversation, I realized that their school experience is really dictated by their emotions throughout the course of their day. That no matter how interesting or futuristic or technological the experience is provided to them, if they don't think that teacher likes them, if they don't think that the classroom environment is a place that's safe and welcoming and fun for them to be in, then their perception of the content changes. And I started my career as a high school English teacher. I was very proud to be a high school English teacher in Newtown, Connecticut. I believed that, as a student in undergraduate degree, I was always looking forward to the days where I would sit in a room as a college professor and be surrounded by students talking about the virtues of J.R.R. Tolkien and connecting the hero's journey with Luke Skywalker and others, and talking about all of the great mysteries and questions of the universe. And I even thought of myself, I even have some jackets, tweed jackets with patches and the whole thing. That was the image of me as I started to become an English teacher back in the day in Newtown. What I never stopped to ask myself was, why would the students want to be there? Why would they want to have these conversations? English teachers tend to experience their day, as Ken Robinson says often, from the neck up. We can look at teaching sometimes as an intellectual exercise and lose sight of the fact that learning, true learning, first and foremost, is an emotional exercise. That we lead with our heart and learn and follow with it, and then our mind follows. The epiphany, if you want to call it that I had from this experience with my kids was social emotional learning, the connection that we make with each other throughout the course of our days in school is at least as important as the content that we're trying to teach them. As a matter of fact, I would even say now, based a few years later, having done some research, I'd say that it is more important. That the way our students feel in our classrooms dictates the way they feel about our content, and not vice versa. We'll talk evidence around all of that. Of course, we'll talk about all of that. But for me, in my experience, I was a high school English teacher. I was a manager of technology operations. I was an assistant principal, dean of students, high school principal for nearly a decade. All of what I did, I was very proud of all of what I did, and always put all of what I had into what I did. But this connection really wasn't clear to me until I started to reflect on my own children and their experiences going through school. It was a leap of faith to think about going to a new place. How do we make this a reality? And so as my capstone for the program, decided that this work would be my focus, because I do believe this is the core work of what we do, for what we do in schools. The creative tension around it is so strong that, and the momentum's so great, that I know we're on the right path in doing this work. So in some of my research, I learned about the value of high emotionally intelligent leaders. And I guess as I started doing my research, I came to realize that my journey to understand emotional intelligence probably began really right in my first year as a teacher. As any new teacher would, I was being observed by Dr. Carmen Jensen, who was my supervisor. So as a new teacher, I was nervous. I anticipated the visit greatly. I was all prepared, ready to go. And she came in to see me and sat through a lesson, and we worked through a scene from Julius Caesar, and we did some dramatic readings and had some fun, did everything that we did in the room. And afterwards I sat, and I was both anxious and nervous to receive her feedback. And I sat with Dr. Jensen, PhD in English literature, brilliant person, and we talked, and she started by telling me that she was impressed by my equanimity in class. Wow, that's fantastic. And we went through the rest of the the evaluation and what have you. Immediately afterwards, I ran to my desk and did what pretty much any new teacher that I know would do at that point, which was grab a dictionary and look up the word equanimity. And learned that equanimity meant an evenness of temperament. And I thought, my parents would be very proud to hear that, seeing that I grew up being told to calm down and to control my temper and to relax with my three brothers. So that comment meant a lot to me, and it's something that I've thought about a lot ever since, because emotionally intelligent people are people who control their emotions instead of being controlled by them. Here in New Canaan Public Schools, the last couple of years, we've developed a vision of emotional intelligence. Our belief, which is to use the power and knowledge of emotions and positive relationships to create a healthier, more equitable, productive, and compassionate school community. That's a tall order, but it's even more powerful than that. We've been on a journey as a school district for years focusing on social-emotional learning. And recently, we've really gone from pockets of excellence to system-wide efforts in order to raise our collective capacity in a meaningful, systematic, and sustainable way. We have learned through Mark Brackett, who's the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale, more about emotional intelligence than we knew a few years ago. We've learned about a system that he uses called Ruler that we're looking to implement across our district. So in order to do this implementation, what we did, we began over the summer with a small group, district leadership team, went off to Yale and spent a couple of days with Mark and his team learning about the program. Afterwards, we designed an emotional intelligence implementation leadership team at each of our schools, K-8, not the high school yet because the training wasn't in place yet. The team consisted of 3 people. And each of those teams went and spent 3 more days over in Yale with Mark and his team learning about how to design this for their school. They came back excited and ready to go. And so since then, that happened in October, since then we've been developing and delivering lessons on a school-wide basis. Because one of the things we realized, and I realized thanks to the conversation with my daughters in the beginning, was to have an emotionally intelligent school, we have to have emotionally intelligent teachers. We have to take the time to train our teachers so they have the skills that we're expecting our kids to have. You know, this work is so important. It's not something you can do in 20 minutes every 10 days as part of an advisory program. It's not something you can do as an add-in after the fact kind of thing. Matter of fact, I would argue that this work around social emotional intelligence is as important, if not more important, than any of the curricular work that we do. And as such, deserves the same attention and the same respect. And when I look across our districts, here, other places, you know, we find beautiful documents, scopes and sequence, curriculum documents, understanding by design in all of our content areas. But we don't see the same thing around social emotional learning. And yet, when we talk to business leaders, when we read the magazines, look at the research, look to see what skills do happy, successful people have. They don't talk about what math course they took. They don't talk about a science course they took. They talk first and foremost about emotional intelligence. They talk about the 21st century skills and their application in the real world. They talk about cooperation, communication. They talk about being emotionally intelligent people. So schools, in our mission to truly prepare students and children to become students, to become adults, to become happy, successful, productive folks in our democracy, schools need to prepare students with the skills they need to be emotionally intelligent. So what does that look like? Mark's system has 5 steps. He calls it RULER. It's recognizing emotions, understanding their causes, labeling them, expressing them, and then regulating them. So how do you do that? There are tools to do all of this. This is a tool he has. He calls it the mood meter. And on this tool, you chart how you're feeling based on energy or pleasantness. If you are in the red quadrant, you're high energy, but you're not happy. So it's anger, unpleasant feelings, frustration comes through there. The blue quadrant is low energy, low unpleasantness. That's sad, reflective, quiet. In the green, it is low energy, but you're happy about it. And that's a calm, serene feeling sometimes. That is someone who, sometimes when you're reading, doing other kinds of activities that are pleasant, low energy. And of course, the yellow is pleasant and high energy. And again, the idea of emotional intelligence is to be able to control your emotions instead of being controlled by them. So when any of us go into a difficult environment, we probably feel our hearts start pumping, our adrenaline rushes, and we move into the red quadrant. And if we allow that emotion to take over, then we're being controlled by our emotions. An emotionally intelligent person can use that, maybe move it over to the yellow quadrant, maybe move it over somewhere else. It's not to ignore how you feel, but it's to recognize how you feel. Understand why you feel that way. And then we label it. Because like all disciplines, emotional intelligence has its own set of vocabulary. A very quick exercise. We often talk about how today's students are so stressed. They are stressed all the time. We talk about it, I talk about it, I think about it with my own children. However, is that the right word? Take a moment, look at these 4 words: anxiety, fear, stress, pressure. Are they synonymous? Often for people it is. They look at stress, they look at these other words, and it can be difficult to draw a distinction. An emotionally intelligent person has an emotional vocabulary to label the way that they're feeling. Anxiety is uncertain about the future. Fear is impending danger. Stress is too many demands and not enough resources. And pressure is a feeling that something's at stake that's dependent upon your behavior now. So something in the future depends upon what you do today. So after understanding this, in my own journey of understanding emotional intelligence, I came to realize that our students, they may be facing stress from time to time, But what we really have to help them understand and deal with and work through is the pressure. The pressure that this test or this moment in time, for whatever reason, will dictate an uncertain future. And again, raising your own children, being an educator for all of my career, I've come to learn and realize that no one test, no one moment, no one thing dictates the future. We have to help our students to understand that. If we put too much pressure on here, on a moment in time, a test, an SAT, smarter balanced assessment, whatever it is, they will too. And then they'll continue to feel this crushing pressure that they're under. So, after labeling your emotions, having the language for it so that we can do something about it, E is to express the emotions, to do it in a way that's healthy and positive and correct. I'm a superintendent of schools. I have difficult meetings and conversations more often than I'd like. When I go into those meetings, I work hard before the meeting to understand my emotions and to put myself into an appropriate emotional state for that conversation. Failure to do so can create a vulnerability for me in the conversation. So while certainly I might be having a wonderful day, something in my life could be going very well, but if I'm going in to have a difficult conversation with a teacher who's having an issue, or with a parent and wants to talk to me about their child, I have to regulate how I'm expressing and feeling so that I'm appropriate for that situation. And by doing that, I can be much more successful in my role. And that's the last one, R, is to regulate our emotions effectively. There are tools to do this. The mood meter is a great way to start. There are others. We talk about the meta moment, where we work to take just a brief fractional moment between stimulus and response to be our best selves at that time. There's a blueprint where we sort of logically and thoughtfully work through whatever's happening. So for our implementation here in the schools, we've begun with our teachers. They've been working now for a few months. We're going to work all of the rest of the year. Our high school team's going out in March. They're going to develop an implementation plan for the high school that spans probably a year and a half or so. And then we're going to start to roll it out to our students. K-12. We want our whole district to be an emotionally intelligent district. We want to have everybody speaking the same language, understanding their emotions, labeling their emotions, using that vocabulary with meaning, so that we can continuously improve in this dimension of life. Because this is a lot more than just a test score or an attendance or a discipline record. These are the skills our students need in order to be as successful as possible in a really dynamic, complex, and uncertain future that we have ahead. The idea around emotional intelligence, I think, is encapsulated by this quote by Viktor Frankl, who says, "Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom." Meditation works to try to open this space, try to expand this moment between stimulus and response. Emotional intelligence does the same. By focusing on this work, by understanding this to be not an add-on, but the core of our efforts in our schools today, we can be most successful, serve them best, and ensure a successful future ahead. Thanks.